When a CEO shows up at a single father's door at midnight with mascara running down her face, something is about to change. Randy Samuel had no idea just how much his life was about to flip upside down. But to understand what happened next, the story has to start in the dark, in the quiet. Music, in a moment he would never forget. 3 weeks before Adriana showed up at his door, Randy had been riding the elevator alone. He worked on the 4th floor accounts payable, the department nobody visited unless something was wrong with their reimbursement. He had been on the phone with Jalen's kindergarten teacher trying to explain why he would be 15 minutes late for pickup again when the elevator stopped on the 32nd floor. The doors opened and Adriana Wells stepped in. Randy recognized her immediately. Everyone in the building knew the CEO, the woman who had taken a struggling tech company and turned it into a billion-dollar enterprise in under 5 years. She was tall, sharp-featured, with the kind of posture that suggested she had never once questioned whether she belonged in any room she entered. Randy lowered his voice, but kept talking. "I understand, Mrs. Patterson. I know this is the 3rd time this month, but I promise I will be there. I'm always there." He ended the call as the elevator descended. Adriana stood 3 feet away, staring at the digital numbers above the door. She didn't acknowledge him. He didn't expect her to, but just before the doors opened on the lobby, she turned her head slightly, not enough to look at him directly, but enough to let him know she had been listening. Randy stepped out first, nodded politely without making eye contact, and walked toward the parking garage. He didn't think about it again. Adriana did. 1 week later, Randy found himself in a conference room he had no business being in. The quarterly merger meeting had pulled in directors and executives from every department. Randy was only there because his supervisor had called in sick, and someone needed to present the accounts payable reconciliation report. He sat at the far end of the table, invisible among the suits, waiting for his 3 minutes of relevance. The meeting turned hostile within the first hour. The merger was not going well. Numbers didn't add up. Projections had been missed, and when the senior vice president of operations needed someone to blame, he pointed his finger at the accounting department. "The discrepancy is right here," the man said, jabbing at the screen. "Your people entered the wrong figures. This is why we're $3 million short on the projection." Randy felt every eye in the room slide toward him, the only representative from accounting, the lowest-ranking person at the table, the black man in a room full of white executives. He could have stayed quiet. He could have nodded, apologized on behalf of his department, and let the meeting move on. That was what he had always done. That was the safe play. Instead, he opened his laptop. "With respect, sir," Randy said, his voice calm and even. "The figures we submitted were accurate. The discrepancy comes from the Q2 revenue adjustment that operations requested in April. I have the email chain here along with the original numbers and the revised numbers your team approved." He turned his screen toward the table. The data was clear. The mistake belonged to operations, not accounting. The room went silent. The SVP's face turned red. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Adriana spoke from the head of the table. "Thank you, mister." She glanced at the attendance sheet. "Samuel, please send those documents to my office after the meeting." Randy nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The meeting continued. Randy didn't say another word, but when he stood to leave, he caught Adriana watching him from across the room. Her expression revealed nothing. That afternoon, she asked her assistant a single question. "The accountant who spoke up today, what's his name? Where does he live?" Her assistant thought the request was strange, but didn't ask why. Dag. Now 3 weeks after the elevator, and 1 week after the meeting, Adriana stood in Rye's doorway at midnight and everything he had built his life around. The rules, the caution, the invisible walls threatened to collapse. "I know this is crazy," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know you could call the police.
I know you could lose your job just for letting me stand here.
But I didn't have anywhere else to go. Randy gripped the doorframe. His mind raced through every possible outcome. A black man alone with a white woman. His CEO. In the middle of the night. If anyone saw them. If anyone talked. If she decided tomorrow that this was a mistake and needed someone to blame. He had spent 34 years learning how to survive in a world that didn't give second chances to men who looked like him. Don't stand out. Don't make waves. Don't give them a reason. But the woman in front of him wasn't a CEO right now. She was a human being falling apart. And somewhere behind him, in the small bedroom at the end of the hall, his 5-year-old son was sleeping the same boy Randy had been teaching to never turn away from people who needed help. What kind of lesson would he be teaching if he shut the door now, 15 minutes? Randy said quietly, "I have a child sleeping. Keep your voice down." He stepped aside. Adriana walked into the apartment like someone entering a place she had only seen in photographs. Her eyes moved across the room. The second-hand couch with the torn armrest, the stack of children's books on the coffee table, the crayon drawings taped crookedly to the refrigerator, the half-finished bowl of cereal Randy hadn't had time to wash. She sat down on the couch and stared at the wall where Jolin's artwork hung. A house, a sun, 2 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small. And then she started to cry. Not the polished, controlled tears of someone who cried for effect. These were ugly, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Randy stood frozen by the kitchen counter, unsure whether to sit to speak or to pretend he wasn't watching his CEO fall apart on his furniture. "My husband," she finally managed. "He was cheating on me for 2 years. I found out a year ago. But I didn't do anything. I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe if I just worked harder, was home more, was better." She stopped, drew a shaky breath. "We signed the divorce papers tonight, and when I got back to my apartment, I realized something. No one called. Not one person. I have 100 contacts in my phone. I had investors, board members, executives, assistants, and not one of them thought to ask if I was okay." Randy didn't respond. He didn't know what to say. "Do you know why I came here?" Adriana looked up at him. Her mascara had smeared into dark circles under her eyes. "That day in the elevator, you were on the phone with your son's teacher, and you said, 'I'm always there.' Just like that. Like it was the most obvious thing in the world." She shook her head slowly. "No one has ever said that to me. Not my parents. Not my husband. Not anyone. I've spent my whole life making sure I didn't need anyone to say it. And tonight, sitting alone in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how you said it like you meant it. And I thought," her voice broke again, "I thought maybe, just maybe, there was one person in that building who wouldn't look at me and see a title, who wouldn't be afraid of me or try to use me." Randy exhaled slowly. He moved to the armchair across from her, keeping the coffee table between them. "I'm not your therapist," he said. "I'm not your friend. And tomorrow, when we're both back in that building, I'm still going to be a low-level accountant, and you're still going to be the CEO. You understand that?" "Right." Adriana nodded. "I understand." "Good." Randy leaned back. "So, what do you actually need right now? And I mean right now, not career advice. Not someone to fix your life. Just tonight." Adriana looked around the small apartment again at the toys on the floor, the colorful artwork on the wall, the faint smell of laundry detergent and maple syrup from the morning's breakfast. "I just need to sit somewhere that feels like someone lives here," she said quietly. "Just for a little while. That's all." Randy studied her face for a long moment. He saw exhaustion. He saw loneliness so deep it had become its own kind of weight, and underneath all of it, he saw something. He recognized the look of someone who had built their entire life around a version of themselves that was starting to crack. He stood and walked to the kitchen. "I'm going to make some tea," he said. "You can stay until the water boils, then you need to leave." Adriana nodded, but they both knew the water would take longer than 15 minutes to boil. They both knew something had already begun. The next morning, Randy left for work before Jolin woke up. He dropped his son at Mrs. Patterson's early pickup program and drove to the office in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, all 12 flights. At his desk, he buried himself in spreadsheets and reconciliation reports when his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for last night. I mean it." He stared at it for 30 seconds, then deleted it without responding. For 3 days. He avoided the 32nd floor entirely. He ate lunch at his desk instead of the cafeteria. He left work at exactly 5 hours before the executives finished their end-of-day meetings. He made himself invisible, which was something he had spent his entire career perfecting. But on the 4th night, Jolin broke through the walls Randy had built. They were sitting at the kitchen table working through Jolin's reading assignment when the boy looked up from his picture book and asked, "Daddy, is the crying lady okay?" Rye's pen stopped moving. What crying lady? Jalen tilted his head the way he always did when he thought his father was being silly. "The pretty lady who came to our house. I woke up and saw her sitting on the couch. She was crying really hard." Randy felt his chest tighten. He had assumed Jolin slept through the whole thing. He had been careful to keep his voice low to keep the living room door mostly closed. But 5-year-olds heard everything. "She's fine," Randy said carefully. "She was just having a hard night. Was she sad because she doesn't have a daddy like me?" The question hit Randy somewhere deep. "Something like that," he admitted. Jolin considered this for a moment. Then he asked, "Were you scared of her?" Randy frowned. "Scared? No. Why would I be scared? I don't know." Jalen shrugged and went back to his book. "She looked like me when I miss Mommy. That's all." Randy didn't respond. He sat there staring at his son, wondering when a 5-year-old had become wiser than he was. 2 weeks after the midnight visit, an email appeared in Rye's inbox. It came from Adriana's executive assistant. A formal, carefully worded request. "Ms. Wells would like to meet with you at the cafe on 5th Street at 700 p. M. Sus this evening. This is not a work-related matter. Please confirm your availability." Randy read it 3 times. His finger hovered over the delete button, but Jolin's voice echoed in his head. "She looked like me when I miss Mommy." He typed back a single word. Confirmed. Tau. The cafe was nearly empty when Randy arrived. Adriana was already there, sitting in a corner booth, and for a moment he almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the sharp blazer and the perfectly styled hair. She wore a simple gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. No heavy makeup, no designer watch. She looked smaller somehow, like someone had let the air out of the image she usually projected. She stood when she saw him, then seemed unsure whether to shake his hand or simply wait. Randy solved the problem by sliding into the booth across from her without any greeting. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Adriana said. "I wasn't sure either." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you for the other night and for not reporting me to HR as a lunatic who showed up at your door at midnight." The thought crossed my mind. Randy signaled the waitress for coffee. "So, what is this? Why am I here?" Adriana wrapped her hands around her mug, staring at the steam rising from the surface. "Can I ask you something personal? Depends on what it is. Have you ever been envious of someone truly envious, not jealous of what they have, but envious of who they are?" Randy considered the question. "Envy is a luxury," he said finally. "I don't have time for it. I'm too busy trying to get through the day." Adriana nodded slowly. "I'm envious of you." The words hung in the air between them. Randy waited for the punchline, the clarification, the moment when she would explain that she was joking. It didn't come. "You're envious of me." he repeated flatly. The CEO of a billion-dollar company is envious of an accountant who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with a torn couch. Yes, Adriana met his eyes. Because when I walked into your apartment, I could feel that someone lived there. I could see it in the drawings on the wall, in the toys on the floor, in the way your son's books were stacked on the coffee table. My penthouse has everything money can buy. And when I walk through the door, it feels like entering a museum, beautiful and empty. You have a child who calls you daddy. You have someone who needs you to come home. Randy sat down his coffee cup harder than he intended. You think I chose this? His voice was low controlled, but there was an edge to it now. You think I woke up one day and decided I wanted to be a single father working a dead-end job in a company that will never promote me? I didn't choose any of this. I was pushed into it. Adriana didn't flinch. She waited. My wife left when Jalin was barely walking. Randy continued. She said I wasn't ambitious enough. She said I was too careful, too safe, too afraid to take risks. And you know what? She was right. But she didn't understand why. I'm a black man in a world that doesn't give people like me second chances. One mistake and everything I've built falls apart. One wrong word in a meeting and I'm the angry black man nobody wants to work with. One complaint from the wrong person and I'm out the door with nothing. I live small because I have to. Because the world has never once given me room to fail. He leaned forward. His eyes locked on hers. You made a mistake with your marriage. You'll recover. You'll buy a new apartment, start a new company, find a new husband who doesn't cheat. You have a safety net made of money and connections, and a world that assumes you deserve second chances. When I make a mistake, my son goes hungry. When I take a risk, my son pays the price. So don't sit there and tell me you're envious of my life. You have no idea what this life costs. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. Adriana didn't look away. She didn't apologize or make excuses. She just sat there, absorbing every word like someone being told a truth they had always suspected but never wanted to hear. You're right, she said quietly. I don't understand. But I want to. Something shifted in Rye's chest. For the first time since she had walked into his apartment, he didn't feel like she was looking down at him. She was simply looking at him. Why? He asked. Why do you care what I think? Adriana took a long breath. Because you're the first person in years who has talked to me like I'm a human being and not a position. Everyone else either wants something from me or is afraid of me. You're neither, and I don't know what to do with that. Randy leaned back in his seat, studying her face. The woman sitting across from him was not the CEO who ran board meetings and negotiated billion-dollar deals. She was just a person trying to figure out who she was underneath the title. He recognized that feeling. He had been running from the same question for years. The rumors started 2 weeks later. Someone in the office had seen them at the cafe. Randy didn't know who, maybe the receptionist from the 12th floor or the marketing manager who always seemed to be everywhere at once. It didn't matter. The story spread like fire through dry grass. Did you hear about the accountant from the 4th floor? The black guy. They say he's sleeping with the CEO to get a promotion. Why else would she meet with him outside the office? Randy heard the whispers in the break room, saw the sidelong glances when he walked past certain cubicles. He kept his head down and did his job the way he always had, but the weight of it pressed down on him like a physical thing. The merger made everything worse. Adriana's position was under threat. The new board members wanted their own people in leadership, and rumors of a CEO involved in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate gave them exactly the ammunition they needed. Employees started picking sides, those loyal to Adriana, those courting favor with the incoming regime. And Randy found himself caught in the middle of a war he had never asked to join. He started coming home later. He spoke less at dinner. He snapped at Jalin for leaving his toys on the floor, then felt guilty about it for hours afterward. One night, as Randy tucked him into bed, Jalen looked up with those wide, knowing eyes that always seemed to see more than they should. "Daddy, are you sad because of the teddy bear lady?" Randy froze. The teddy bear lady. The crying lady. She gave me a teddy bear. Remember, he did remember. Adriana had visited again the previous weekend. She brought a small stuffed bear for Jalen Brown and soft, with a ribbon around its neck, and spent an hour sitting on the floor with him looking at his drawings, asking questions about each one. Randy had watched from the kitchen doorway, unsure what to feel as this powerful woman laughed at a 5-year-old's crayon drawing of a dinosaur wearing a hat. "I'm fine," Randy said, pulling the blanket up to Jalen's chin. "Don't worry about me." But Jalen didn't look convinced. The HR summons came on a Tuesday afternoon. Randy received the email at 2:00 and was sitting in the Human Resources Director's office by 2:30. The room was small and beige with motivational posters on the walls that seemed to mock the conversation about to take place. The director, a thin woman named Mrs. Bradley with reading glasses perched on her nose. "Didn't waste time with pleasantries, Mr. Samuel. I'll be direct. There have been allegations regarding your relationship with Ms. Wells. The board is concerned that there may be a personal involvement that could constitute a conflict of interest or a violation of company policy." Randy felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his face neutral. "What kind of allegations that you and Ms. Wells are engaged in a romantic relationship, that you have been meeting outside of work hours, that there may be favoritism involved in your employment status?" The words hit him like cold water. He thought of Jalen. He thought of the apartment, the bills, the careful balance of a life held together by discipline and caution. "Is there a question in there?" Randy asked. Mrs. Bradley folded her hands on the desk. "Do you have a romantic relationship with Ms. Wells?" Two paths opened in front of him. He could tell the truth that Adriana had come to him in a moment of crisis, that they had talked, that something complicated and undefined had begun to grow between them. He could stand up for himself and for her, or he could survive. "I've met with Ms. Wells a few times," Randy heard himself say. "Strictly professional. She consulted me on some accounting matters related to the merger. There's nothing personal between us." The lie tasted like ash in his mouth. Mrs. Bradley studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. We'll note your statement in the file. You're free to go." Randy stood and walked toward the door. As he stepped into the hallway, he saw her. Adriana was standing at the far end of the corridor just outside the boardroom. She was too far away for him to read her expression clearly, but he knew she had heard everything. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Adriana turned and walked away without a word. The look in her eyes stayed with Randy the whole drive home. Not anger, not betrayal, just a deep, tired sadness. The expression of someone who had learned long ago that people always chose safety over loyalty. That night, Randy sat in Jalen's doorway and watched his son sleep. The small bedroom was cluttered with toys and books, the walls covered with drawings and stickers. The teddy bear Adriana had given him was tucked under Jalen's arm, its soft brown fur pressed against the boy's cheek. Randy thought about his father, who had worked 2 jobs his entire life and never complained. He thought about his mother, who had told him every day to keep his head down, work hard, and never give them a reason to notice him. He thought about his ex-wife standing in the doorway of their old apartment, suitcase in hand, telling him he would never be anything more than what he was. And he thought about what he had taught Jalen. Don't be afraid. Stand up for yourself. Never let anyone make you feel small. But today, in that beige office with the motivational posters, Randy had done exactly what he taught his son never to do. He had shrunk. He had hidden. He had denied someone who trusted him just to protect a job he didn't even like. Jalen stirred in his sleep, pulling the teddy bear closer. "Is the teddy bear lady coming back, Daddy?" he murmured. Half awake, Randy couldn't answer. A few minutes later, Jalin opened his eyes again, looking at his father with a clarity that seemed impossible for a child so young.
Daddy, are you scared of her?
Rai's throat tightened.
You told me not to be scared of anyone,
Jalin said softly.
You told me brave people don't run away.
The words broke something inside Randy that had been holding together for years. He sat on the edge of his son's bed, staring at the teddy bear with its ribbon and soft fur, and finally admitted the truth he had been running from his entire adult life. He wasn't teaching Jalin courage. He was teaching him how to be afraid. Randy didn't sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table until 300 in the morning, staring at a blank sheet of paper at some point. He started writing not to Adriana, but to Jalin, words he wanted his son to understand when he was old enough to read them. I have spent my whole life being afraid of being seen, afraid of being judged, afraid of giving the world a reason to take what little I have. I thought I was protecting you by teaching you to be careful. But careful isn't the same as brave, and I've been confusing the two for 34 years, he wrote until the sun came up, when Jalin padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Randy folded the letter and tucked it into his wallet.
Daddy, are you okay?
Jalin asked.
Randy looked at his son at the teddy bear, still clutched under one arm, at the eyes that saw everything and forgave even more. I'm going to be, Randy said. I promise.
And he arrived at the office before anyone else. The HR department didn't open until 8:30, so Randy sat in the lobby and waited. He watched employees trickle in, the early risers, the ambitious ones, the people who thought getting to work first meant something. None of them looked at him. He had spent years making sure of that. At 8:32, Mrs. Bradley walked past the lobby toward her office. Randy stood and followed her.
Mr. Samuel.
She looked surprised when she saw him in her doorway. Is there something I can help you with?
Yes.
Randy stepped inside and closed the door behind him. I need to correct the statement I gave yesterday. Mrs. Bradley's expression shifted from confusion to caution. She gestured for him to sit, but Randy remained standing. Yesterday, you asked if I had a personal relationship with Ms. Wells. I told you it was strictly professional. He took a breath. That wasn't true. The room seemed to shrink around him. Ms. Wells and I are friends, Randy continued. We've spent time together outside of work. We've talked about things that had nothing to do with accounting or the merger. There's been no romantic relationship and no professional favoritism. But I wasn't honest with you yesterday, and I need to fix that. Mrs. Bradley removed her glasses and set them on the desk. Mr. Samuel, do you understand what you're saying? This could affect your employment status. It could affect. I understand. Randy met her eyes, and I'm saying it anyway because I have a 5-year-old son at home, and every day I tell him to be brave, to stand up for himself, to never let anyone make him feel small. Yesterday, I looked him in the face and realized I was teaching him the opposite. I was teaching him that it's okay to lie if you're scared enough, that protecting yourself matters more than protecting the people who trust you. He shook his head slowly. I won't do that anymore. If you want to fire me, fire me. But I'm done denying someone just to keep a job I never loved in the first place. Mrs. Bradley stared at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her glasses and put them back on. I'll update the file, she said quietly. You can go. Randy nodded and walked out. His hands were shaking, but for the first time in longer than he could remember. His chest didn't feel tight. He found Adriana's address in the company directory the same way she had found his. The penthouse was in a building downtown, all glass and steel, the kind of place Randy had only ever seen from the outside. The doorman looked him up and down, but let him pass when Randy gave Adriana's name. The elevator rose 30 floors in silence when Adriana opened her door. She was wearing jeans and an old university sweatshirt. Her hair was unwashed. Behind her, Randy could see moving boxes stacked against the walls. "Randy." Her voice was flat. "Careful. What are you doing here?" "I went to HR this morning," he said. "I told them the truth. I told them we're friends." Adriana's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes. "Why?" "Because I was a coward yesterday. I chose my fear over you. And that's not who I want to be. It's not who I want my son to see." Randy looked past her at the boxes, the half-empty rooms, the penthouse that was already starting to look like a place nobody lived. "What's happening here?" Adriana stepped back, letting him inside. "I resigned this morning. The board was going to force me out anyway after the merger. So I decided to leave on my own terms." She gestured at the boxes. "I'm not sure where I'm going yet. First time in my life. I don't have a plan." Randy walked slowly through the living room. The furniture was expensive. The view was stunning. But Adriana was right. The space felt like a museum. There were no drawings on the walls, no toys on the floor, no evidence that anyone had ever truly lived here. "You're not going to miss this," he said. "No." Adriana sat on the arm of a white leather couch. "I spent 15 years climbing to get here, and now that I'm leaving, I can't think of a single thing I want to take with me." Randy turned to face her. "I owe you an apology. What I did yesterday denying you in front of HR, that wasn't about you, it was about me. About all the years I spent making myself small because I thought that was the only way to survive." Adriana shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I'm the one who showed up at your door uninvited. I'm the one who pulled you into my mess." "You gave me something I didn't know I needed," Randy said. "A chance to see myself through someone else's eyes. Someone who wasn't judging me or afraid of me or trying to use me, and I wasted it because I was scared." He took a step closer. "I don't know what we are. I don't know what this is or where it goes, but I'm done pretending you don't exist. I'm done pretending that the only way to protect myself is to push away everyone who gets close." Adriana looked at him for a long time. Then slowly, she smiled the first real smile he had seen from her since that night in the cafe. "Jalin asked about you," Randy added. "He calls you the teddy bear lady." Adriana laughed, and the sound filled the empty penthouse in a way nothing else could. 3 months later, Randy still worked at the same company. He hadn't been fired, but he hadn't been promoted either. He didn't care. Every evening after Jalin went to bed, Randy sat at the kitchen table with textbooks and practice exams spread out in front of him. He was studying for his independent financial consulting certification, the first step toward the dream he had buried years ago. Jalin noticed the change. "Daddy, what are you doing?" he asked one night, climbing into Rye's lap to look at the books. "I'm learning how to not be scared anymore," Randy said. Jalin considered this with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could manage. "Is it working?" Randy smiled. "I think so." Adriana had moved into a small apartment across town. She was working as a consultant for a nonprofit that helped women start their own businesses, a job that paid 90% less than her CEO salary and made her 90% happier. She came to visit Jalin every other week, sitting on the floor with him to look at his drawings, reading him stories before bed, laughing at jokes that only made sense to a child. She and Randy talked on the phone most nights, long conversations about nothing and everything, the kind of conversations neither of them had ever had with anyone else. They didn't define what they were. They didn't need to. For now. It was enough to simply exist in each other's lives without pretense or fear. On the morning of his first interview for an independent consulting position, Randy stood in front of the bathroom mirror adjusting his tie. His phone buzzed, a text from Adriana. "Good luck today. Jalin made you something. I'll send a picture." A moment later, a photo appeared, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall one, medium, one small, underneath, in wobbly kindergarten letters. Jalin had written, "Daddy is Brav. Randy stared at the picture for a long time. Then he walked to Jalen's room and pushed open the door. His son was just waking up, the teddy bear still tucked under his arm. "Hey, buddy." Randy sat on the edge of the bed. "I need to tell you something before I go." Jalen rubbed his eyes. "What, Daddy?" Randy took his son's hand. "You weren't born to make yourself small for the world, and neither was I. It took me a long time to learn that, too long, but I don't want you to wait as long as I did. I want you to know it now while you're still young enough to believe it." Jalen looked at him with those wide, serious eyes. "Okay. Daddy." Randy kissed his forehead and stood at the front door. He took one last look at the apartment, the toys scattered across the floor, the crayon masterpieces covering the refrigerator, the small life he had built out of love and fear and everything in between. Then he stepped outside. For the first time in 34 years, Randy Samuel wasn't walking toward a job he tolerated or a life he had settled for. He was walking toward something he had chosen, and that made all the difference.